Hey guys, so today we're gonna do something a little crazy. Welcome back to my channel, and if you didn't know, my name is Blake the Book Eater. Before we get into the video, please make sure to subscribe if you hadn't already for more bookish content, and don't forget to follow me on Instagram and Twitter for other content that won't make it on the channel. So if you guys didn't notice, I've been behind recently, and mostly is because I didn't want to deal with the daunting task of having to do individual book reviews for as many books as I had read. So what is the best way to do this? We're gonna have a mass review today. Think of it as kind of a wrap-up, or a trilogy of trilogies, as I've been calling it in my head, because we are going to talk about 3 different entire trilogies today. And how we're going to do it is I am going to make sure to refer to the chapter times in the description below if you would like to, because I'm going to just talk non-spoilery about the trilogy as a whole, and then I'm going to do the same with each book in that trilogy. So I am going to talk about the Poppy War Trilogy, the Grisha Trilogy, and the Mortal Instruments, the first trilogy today. So that is 9 books to talk about. So we're going to be here for a while. So I'm going to talk about like non-spoiler about the Poppy War Trilogy, and then go non-spoiler and spoiler sections for each book in that trilogy. And we're going to do that for all 9 books here today. So strap in, buckle up. It's gonna be a ride. Grab some tea or coffee or a big bowl of ice cream, and let's get into this. So the first trilogy we're gonna talk about today is the Poppy War Trilogy by R.F. Kuang. Now I read these at the end of December into early January, and overall I think this was a really good trilogy. I do have some mixed feelings about the trilogy as a whole, which I'll get into in my more individual book reviews. Something big that I will say is that this series does require a lot of trigger warnings. So if there's something that you like are really bothered by or triggered about, there's a pretty good chance it's probably in this trilogy. So that's why I say, like, you know, tread lightly. Going into this, I will link a blog post below by my friend Tiffany, who did a fantastic job about laying out all the trigger warnings for this trilogy, as well as delving into the historical inspirations. Because if you guys didn't know, the Poppy War Trilogy was actually influenced by actual Chinese history, and so R.F. Kuang took that and then crafted it into her own fantasy universe, which is really, really cool. And I just loved reading Tiffany's blog after finishing the trilogy and kind of putting together the dots of like what characters were pulled from when and where, and it was awesome. So highly recommend reading that. It's a really good read. Okay, so we're going to get into the first book, the Poppy War. So my non-spoilery thoughts for the Poppy War is that I really love this book, actually. This is my favorite book in the entire trilogy. It perfectly captures, I think, the heart of the trilogy as a whole too, because you have Rin, who is an orphan, who is then kind of, she goes through this intense test and makes it into the Sinigard Military Academy. And so the first half of this book is like, you know, kind of like, you know, dealing with like school stuff, a lot of like academia stuff that we've seen in books before, but the way that R.F. Kuang writes it is just so fascinating, and I loved that half of the book. Just loved it. It was so great. And then the second half comes, and it's very different, and we get a lot of darker things going on, but just as compelling. And I think this book was I finished this book in 2 days, just because I was so compelled by it. And I think this is where R.F. Kuang's storytelling is at its finest, getting you invested in the characters and the story and the world, and I thought this was fantastic. I'm gonna get into my spoilery thoughts now, so if you'd like to skip to my non-spoilery thoughts for the next book, check the description. Okay, so let's get into spoilery thoughts. So, Rin, I think, is at her best as a character here, because before she descends into genocide, as she does at the end of the book. And so, like, I found it like really easy to care about her because she's an orphan and we see all of the things that she's going through. I hated Neza in this book because he's an asshole. to Rin and kind of just in general. But I love Kate. Kate I thought was wonderful. The world, I love the subtle way that R.F. Kuang built up the magic, where it doesn't feel like it comes out of nowhere, but it feels like it definitely has its place in this world. But it's like so subtle in the first half that when it starts to show up, you're like, oh shit, and then like it like kind of explodes like near the end. You're like, oh, we're gonna go there, and go there it did. This book made some really bold choices, and I really loved it for it. And so yeah, at the end of the day, I think The Poppy War is the best book in the trilogy, and it's very good. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Okay, now we're going to get into my non-spoilery thoughts about The Dragon Republic. Now, this was my least favorite book in the trilogy. I would give this, I gave The Poppy War a 5 out of 5. I think I gave this a 3 out of 5. Honestly, I felt most of this book was kind of a slog. I'm sorry guys, but it just didn't really do it for me. And whereas I think the impact of just seeing like the war crimes and stuff in the Poppy War was so impactful. It was like, it was really hard to read about, really fucking hard to read about, but like it was very impactful because of that. But like in this book, I feel like it just kind of became torture porn for like most of the book, and I was getting very detached because of that. And also I found it really hard to care about Ren as a character in this book because of what happened at the end of the first book. And just throughout this whole book, it was like I found myself really emotionally detached and not kind of caring about what happened. I will have to say there were some really good moments and sequences, but like a plot thread that I thought was going to become bigger, like it was set up at the end of book 1, and then coming into book 2, it was resolved. Like it was like ignored for most of the book, and then it was resolved like very immediately in the climax, and I was really disappointed by that because that was a character that I really wanted to know more about, and so it's just I just had more problems with this book. And also like we were trying to care about Neza in this one, and I just still didn't really care about Neza. Because I don't know what it was. It just like, it didn't really do it for me because we weren't really getting like to see his side. And I know there is a like a little short story, The Drowning Faith, about Neza's POV, and that's set between books 2 and 3, and I did read that. It didn't really change my opinion, honestly, and I think it should have been folded into the trilogy as a whole, because then maybe if I had gotten some of those POVs from Neza, I would have cared, but I just kind of didn't. So yeah, there were some good things about this book, but overall, I was just kind of feeling very meh the whole time, and it took me way longer to read because of that. Okay, so I'm going to talk about spoilers for The Dragon Republic now, and then if you want to skip to non-spoilers about the Burning God, description. Okay, so the thing that I was kind of mentioning was Phelan. He was a character that was like, I was like, okay, we're gonna have like a wind dragon god, like, yes, please. And then he disappeared for most of the book, and then he came at the end and died immediately. And so that was really disappointing, just because I think like, and also Daji wasn't in this book as much as I wanted her to be, and she kind of like was in the beginning, and then she left out, and then she came at the end. And so like a lot of this book, I was just feeling very just like meh about. And yeah, I just found it very hard to care about Rin after she committed genocide and had like no regret. And like we did see that start to weigh on her, like in some bits and areas, but yeah, it just like was really hard for me to read about, because the thing is, like, if you're watching a movie and you have an unlikable like protagonist, it's a lot easier to just kind of be like, okay, I'm just gonna go along and watch them for like 2 hours, and you're like, you know, that you don't condone their actions. You know, I just watched this movie, I Care a Lot, on Netflix, and I think it did a fantastic job of like showing you a very unlikable, terrible person, but you were like invested and like interested in what the plot was and what they were doing. Whereas something like Joker, I hate that movie, because I feel like the director really kind of put the audience in a position where you're supposed to empathize with the Joker, and I didn't, because he murdered people for no reason. And so much in the same way, it was really hard for me to care about Rin as a character, because you aren't just spending like 2 hours like with Rin, like you've been in her head for like a whole book, you know, like 8 to 10 hours of reading. And then like in this book, like, you know, even more 8 to 10 hours of reading. And you get that kind of like unlikability, which is fine. I'm all for having unlikable protagonists. It was just then really hard for me to empathize with her. And honestly, in this book, she wasn't as proactive as I wanted her to be, so it wasn't even like that interesting really to read about. I do have to say a lot of my problems with Rin as a character were like definitely resolved and fixed in book 3. So let's get into book 3 now. And so that's the end of my spoiler thoughts for Dragon Republic. So the Burning God takes us back to the heights of the first book for me, because we have a lot more going on, and I think that Rin is a very proactive protagonist in this book, whereas I feel like she was very passive in book 2. And I just really love the plot line in this book because a lot of the more mystical elements come in a lot more full force, and it was just very fascinating to read about. We got more epic things happening, and overall I think this was a fantastic end to the trilogy, and I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. And so this is a trilogy that like, and I don't want to say much more because, you know, end of the series, spoilers, I don't want to do that yet until we get into the spoiler section, but just overall, I think the trilogy was really good. It was extremely well written, and so I will have to say R.F. Kuang's writing I think was the best part about this trilogy. The first book is still my favorite. The second book I did not enjoy. The third book I actually did enjoy. But I would hesitate to recommend this just because it is so brutal and so dark. So just make sure that you know like what you're getting into, because I've seen this getting like really popular on like book Twitter and things like that. And so I'm just like worried that people who have pretty much only read YA are gonna jump into this adult fantasy series and be kind of taken aback when it gets very, very dark. So just make sure that you know what you're getting into. But if you know and you're okay with that, I think that there is a very entertaining ride that you're gonna take with this trilogy. Okay, so time for spoiler thoughts. Okay, so this book was wild. I think Rin really came into full force because I think once she accepted that like this is who she was, instead of like getting that kind of like self-hatred parts of book 2, which makes sense with her character, it just like, I just didn't really enjoy reading about it. But in this book, Rin became like really interesting for me to read about again. And I just loved the plot. The plot was really awesome. Like Rin kind of becoming the like martyr of the South, and like the thing that got people to like be inspired again. And there's so much that I could talk about with the themes and the socio-political, socio-economical like side of things, but I think Tiffany's blog does a fantastic job of that, so please read that if you have not. And also I really loved that like the mystical side, the magic was so involved in this book because it was just so interesting to read about, because, you know, Rin was very capped in book 2, like she was nerfed, and in this she like lets loose, and so that was so fun to read about. The one like big criticism I have about this book is like I really wanted to see more of the Dragon Emperor, because they wake him up and then he's like evil, which they all expected, and then he dies. And so I was like, and like he died very easily, which, and it's again, like that's something that like that's a choice, but I feel like she did the same thing in book 2 with Fei Lin. And so it just like, it felt like kind of a repeat beat of like having a really strong, like powerful person that could like take down Rin, and then they die immediately. And so that wasn't a repeat beat that I was a fan of, just because like I did want to see more of the Dragon Emperor. And I feel like if we hadn't seen the same thing happen to Fei Lin, the Dragon Emperor thing would bother me less. But because I feel like if you just gonna like have an insta-death, the Dragon Emperor would be shocking. But like having it happen twice, 2 books in a row, I was just kind of like, ugh, but I want to see more. And the Hesperians were assholes, and I was rooting for Rin to kill them. Because they were just gonna come and colonize and subjugate an entire species, or not species, but an entire people who thought, you know, like they thought they did think they were a different species, basically, that they were lesser than, because they're colonizers and assholes. And also I love the ending. I thought the ending to this trilogy was really, really good. It was unexpected, it was brutal, and it was just kind of the perfect end to this story. And so I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it, and yeah, I would recommend the trilogy as a whole, but only to people who kind of know what they're getting into. So let's move on to the next trilogy. The next trilogy that we're going to talk about is the Grisha Trilogy. Now, here are my non-spoiler thoughts for the trilogy as a whole. This is a trilogy that I had heard very mixed things about kind of going in, because I had already read the Six of Crows duology, and so like I already kind of knew the world, and so getting into this, I was like, okay, I really hope like I get a better understanding, etc. And I was kind of surprised at how blown away, like how much I love this trilogy. That was kind of insane to me, because I did not expect that going in. And I really did. So let's talk about the books now. So first up we have Shadow and Bone. Now this, I think, is the worst book in the trilogy. I did not like this book for like the first 2/3 of it. Like literally it was a 2-star. I was kind of like over it. I was not having a good time. And then the ending like third happened, and it was weird because suddenly it became a 4-star. Like the last third was like a 4-star for me, like a solid 4-star. And I loved it. And all the things that were like set up in the annoying parts of the book like paid off so beautifully, and I was like, what is this? And so it's weird because I feel like if I went back and read this book, I would have a higher rating of it. So yeah, that's kind of weird, but let's get into spoilers now. Boop. Okay, so spoilers. Yeah, I was really annoyed with Alina for most of this book, just because the stuff with her and Maul was like really annoying. Not annoying, like it was mostly because that like Maul was like treating Alina like he was hers, even though he didn't say anything to her, and then, you know, they were all getting jealous over each other. Like, I hate that trope. The miscommunication trope is the worst, and yeah, like 0 out of 10, hate it so much. And then also the whole thing where she's like, I'm not like other girls, and then she like is bitchy to all the other women except for Genya. And she was like, I hate them because they're beautiful, basically, and then like I'm ugly, and then she gets a makeover and she's like, oh, I'm pretty. Like that just like is a really annoying trope to me, and I feel like it's very indicative of the kind of period of why that this book was coming out in. However, all the things that also I don't like the Darkling. Sorry, he's an abuser. He's an asshole. Like, I'm sorry, y'all who find him hot. I do not. He's like mysterious, and that's all he has going for him. He's kind of boring. Anyways, so, but all the kind of like annoying stuff makes sense because Alina's a teenager. And so in that way, I think that she was very like accurately written because, you know, when I was a teenager, I was dealing with all this, you know, stupid shit like that as well. So she does definitely feel like her age. And then, but like all the weird stuff that I didn't enjoy in the first half paid off beautifully in the second half. You know, the Darkling manipulating her, it was all planned to get like the stag, and the whole ending where Maul and Alina like kind of go off and they're like trying to find the stag together. I think that paid off their romance beautifully because like I was really annoyed at it, but then by the end I was like, I really care about them as a couple. Like I really do. There was just so much that was happening in the final portion of this book, and I thought it was great, and I really loved it. It was so good. And so that's why like this book is, I think, is the most conflicting of the trilogy, because it's such a rocky start, but it sets up a lot of amazing things for the rest of the trilogy, and the ending of this book is really, really good. So would I recommend this book? Yes, because the trilogy as a whole is fantastic, but you just have to get through the first half of this book. Now, if I went and reread it, maybe I would feel differently. Who knows? But yeah. Okay, so let's talk about Siege and Storm. So Siege and Storm is the second book in the Grisha Trilogy. And This book was awesome. It took the energy that the first book had, like at the end, and just carried you throughout the whole thing. We get a great new character, Stormhund, and he was awesome. And we have things happening. I don't want to say too much because of non-spoilery, but wow, this was such a fun ride, and I genuinely really enjoyed it. And so yeah, this I think really cements the series as like worth reading for me. And yes, you do have some like annoying Maul and Alina stuff, at least in some people's opinion. In my opinion, I actually really liked the romance drama in this book for some reason, because I think it felt more realistic than the stuff that was happening in book 1. So whereas I was annoyed at the romantic stuff in book 1, in book 2, I was kind of here for it. So I don't know what that says about me, but like I enjoyed book 2 a lot more. So let's talk spoilers. Okay, so Nikolai Stormhund, he was great. Best new character. He was just the infusion of energy that this trilogy really needed. We got a lot more of Alina's powers, which was awesome. I actually really loved Alina and Maul as a couple in this book. The Darkling was still annoying, but we got that amazing sequence at the end when the palace gets like taken over. Say what you will about Leigh Bardugo, but she can fucking write an action scene, and it's so intense and so good. And surprisingly, I started to feel like emotional about the characters. Whereas book 1, I mostly didn't care about them up until the end. In book 2, I was starting to feel that emotion throughout the whole thing. And we'll talk about book 3 in a second. But like, yeah, I'm just really glad that this series, and like, I was able to really see Leigh Bardugo grow as a writer over just a couple, like 100 pages, like from book 1 to book 2. Like she improved even more. And then I think again in book 3 and, you know, Six of Crows. So I'm just like really glad I'm able to see her journey as a writer, because that also is just really fascinating to me. Let's talk about Ruin and Rising. Okay, so Ruin and Rising. I loved this book, and it's weird because I heard that this was the most polarizing book in the trilogy from fans, but this was like my favorite, like, because all the stakes and everything in the first 2 just come full force in this book, and they pay off so well. And I really started to get really emotional about these characters, whereas like I did not care about them in book 1. By like book 3, I'm like really caring about them and like really emotional about them. And so that was so weird to me, but that just really emphasizes how good of a writer that Leigh Bardugo is. And so I'm just like really excited, or really happy, that I went back and read this trilogy, just because I feel like they're all fantastic, but this just was such a beautiful, amazing ending to the trilogy. Like, I almost cried in the epilogue just because it was so perfect. So yeah, I highly recommend that you pick up this trilogy. It's great. And we have the Netflix show coming out, which is going to be so awesome. And so yeah, even if the first book is a little bit of a rocky start, I think you will find yourself loving the trilogy just like I did. And if not, we have more Grisha content with like Six of Crows and stuff. So like Leigh Bardugo definitely has books that you want to read. Spoilers now. Spoilers. Okay, so first what the fuck of the book was when Nikolai turned into like a wing, like a bat thing. That kind of came out of nowhere, and that was wild. I'm just putting that here because I don't know where else to fit it, but that was crazy. Also, I really loved their hunt. I love that Alina and Maul were kind of like outcast in this book, and the whole tension between them, like, it made sense, but it was still a little frustrating. But like, because of the emotion that I felt through their romantic journey in book 2, I feel like that like kind of torturedness was paid off really well in book 3. And just the fight scenes and the overall awesomeness of this trilogy was just great to see. And I was just really emotional about the characters at the end, and like when Alina lost her powers, and I really loved this book. I really did. And I thought the trilogy as a whole was great. And so like just the ending to this trilogy, Like, especially like the moment that like broke my heart was like in the epilogue when like Alina's like playing with the sunbeam because she like lost everything. She's not gonna get it back again, but she's with Maul and they have an orphanage and they're running and they're raising it, like emotion, so good. And I'm just very excited to reread. I'm going to reread the Six of Crows duology and then read the King of Scars and Rule of Wolves before the Netflix show, which is very exciting. And I've been doing this kind of read along with my pals in the Ravka Historical Society, as we've been calling it. There's the Discord, which I will link down below, and over on Insta and Twitter as well. But yeah, so this trilogy is awesome and highly recommended. And we come to the last trilogy in this Trilogy of Trilogies review. That is the Mortal Instruments, the first 3, because Cassie wrote these books and then wrote another trilogy and then came back and wrote another, like a sequel trilogy to this, continuing the story. So I'm just gonna treat this like a trilogy because it was originally structured like one, so we're just gonna pretend like it is. So overall, I thought this was very meh. I enjoyed a lot of bits about it. However, there's one thing that tanked the trilogy for me. You get brownie points if you're able to guess what it is, because I was tweeting about it, about how much I had to suffer through it. Anyways, let's talk about City of Bones. City of Bones is the first book in the Mortal Instruments series, and it's like, you know, all the stories are real. So you have, you know, warlocks and fairies and werewolves and vampires and demons, and so the shadow hunters are demon hunters, and they're basically magic cops and trying to keep the badness out, and the badness is the demons, and like the downworlders are like the vampires and the werewolves and the fairies, etc., who just kind of live alongside the humans because they're like half demon, or they have demon blood in them. So some shadow hunters don't like them, but ACAB, you know. Anyways, so I actually buddy read this with Cindy from Read with Cindy, and we both had mixed feelings about this book. I went on to read the rest of the trilogy, she did not. And this just felt very 2007 YA, and you know, it is, because it is, and that's not a bad thing. It's just, I think it's very telling as to how the YA genre has really evolved over the last like 15 years, which is crazy to think about. Like, this book is that old, but you know, this is a series that I grew up hearing a lot about, and I just ignored it the whole time, but it was actually refreshing to get back into it, or to get into it, because I think I was able to see the seeds of why people fell in love with this trilogy, because I think there was definitely parts that I really enjoyed about it. I thought the story was pretty entertaining. I was like, it had me turn in the pages, okay? Like, it wasn't boring. At least this book wasn't. And I really liked the setting of the world. The characters are pretty interesting. And I actually really have to give Cassandra Clare props for having a like canon, like gay kind of character slash couple in this series. When it was in 2007, like, just, it's crazy to think about, like, you know, how far we've come as a society in like acceptance in like that time, but like at that time period, like, that was not a very, you know, popular thing to do. Like, it wasn't, you know, publishers did not go out of their way to, you know, uplift queer stories or anything like that. And so just to have like this huge mainstream series with like a gay character, like an openly gay character in it, was like, that was really awesome to read about. And like, maybe if I had read these when I was like younger, I would have really appreciated that, because I'm queer, so. But yeah, so let's get into spoilery thoughts for City of Bones. If you want to jump to my non-spoilery thoughts for the other books, down below. Okay, so first we need to talk about the thing that tanked the whole trilogy for me, and that is the incest reveal I fucking hated it. I hated it so much. And that's why I think I enjoyed this book the most out of the entire trilogy, because that was like the twist at the end. So it didn't really impact the book for most of it. The reason why I gave it 3 stars is because like it did feel kind of like very, very tropey at times, whereas like I feel like it was kind of a mishmash of like Twilight and Harry Potter and a bunch of other things. I wasn't like mad about it. It just didn't feel like very unique. And so, but like, I'm not gonna hold that against it. It was fun. I enjoyed some of the action. And while it did feel like fan fiction at times, like it was like enjoyable. Like I was through it, you know, going through it, with the characters, and I enjoyed that. However, there were just some like weird prose choices that were made, and like turns of language that I just did not particularly enjoy, and kind of annoyed the fuck out of me, to be honest. So that's it. Just like little things like that just kind of like tanked it and just kind of made it feel like very meh overall. I did say, you know, it's enjoyable, and would I read it again? Probably not, but I am glad that I did read it, and I do plan on finishing the entire Shadowhunter series just because I've heard how much Cassie has grown as an author. And so like Leigh Bardugo, I'm excited to see that growth, because I am all for seeing a writer grow and change and get better. So let's talk about City of Ashes now. Okay, so this book was not good. Like, and this is the non-spoilery section, so I'll be vague, but most of the book was like really repetitive. It was really boring. There was angst over something that I hated. And the only thing that saved this book for me and like made me feel comfortable giving it a 3 stars was the ending was really good. Like I really liked the ending. I thought like the energy of the ending was something that I was missing from the book the whole time. And so I was like, I know that like you can write this, Cassie. Please give me more of this and this. But yeah, this book was not good. Let's talk spoilers. So, incest angst tanked this book. It was so fucking annoying. I was done with it. Like, as soon as it started, I hated it. And then, this whole book, I hated it. The only thing that, like, made me not DNF it is because, like, just from being around for so long, I knew that Jace and Clary were not actually siblings. Oh, and that's a spoiler for City of Ash, or Glass, but it's not that much of a spoiler. Honestly, it's a spoiler that's probably going to help you get through these books, because if I didn't know that, I would have DNF'd this 100%. But yeah, so I just like, knowing that it wasn't real helped me because this book would have been unbearable if I had genuinely thought they were siblings. And it still annoyed the fuck out of me. So yeah, and then also Jace was getting captured like every 2 seconds in this book. Like he would be like, oh, I'm doing a thing, and then he gets captured, and then he escapes, and then like, oh, I'm doing another thing, and then he gets captured. And I was like, Jace, can you please do something else? And that was the book. Well, and then we have, you know, the attack on Valentine's ship at the end, and then we do get, you know, kind of like hints that Jace is not actually related to Valentine. Not really, but kind of. And I really liked the attack. I thought it was good. The reveal that Clary's powers are more stronger than she thought was pretty cool. And yeah, I think it set the stage for like a interesting 3rd book. And yes, we did get an interesting 3rd book. We'll talk about that in a sec. But yeah, so overall, this book was not good. I will wait to see if I recommend this whole series after I finish the back 3 of the Mortal Instruments. But overall, honestly, I would not recommend this book. This book was bad. And then we have the last book in the first trilogy, wrapping up the first kind of big plot arcs, and that is City of Glass. And this book was good. I will have to say I enjoyed this more than the second one, because the second one was bad. And I actually did enjoy the plot of this book a lot more than the first one. But certain things tanked this book as well, and if you know, you know by now. But and And so yeah, it was just really frustrating to like constantly deal with that when I think there was like a really interesting, cool book underneath. So yeah, let's get into spoilers. Or actually, before we get into spoilers, I do want to say, so overall, would I recommend this first trilogy? Kind of. Like, I hear that the back half is better. So just once I finish like the 6 of the Mortal Instruments, I will let you guys know my thoughts on whether I recommend them or not. After having read the first 3, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it because I've heard that Cassandra Clare's other trilogies are actually better. And so I don't know if this is the best showcase of her writing and her plotting and her characters. I feel like this is something that you could, like, if you read The Infernal Devices or something, which I've heard is like one of her best ones, and then come back and read this, you can like make it through knowing that she's a better writer. But having just read these, I don't know like if I would want to seek out the rest if I didn't know that they were better, supposedly. So that's why like I can't recommend them. Like, I just personally cannot recommend these. But if you are interested in them and you think that you can make it through, like, go ahead, because I've heard that there are bigger and better things. So if you're interested in the world and the universe, because I do think the world that she created is pretty like unique, and I really enjoyed the world. I just want to see more stories in this world that are not this story. So yeah, we'll see. Okay, let's talk about spoilers now. So, fucking incest, Jesus Christ, really annoyed me so much throughout this book. Like, and the thing is, the rest, I'll talk about the rest of the plot in a moment, but I really enjoyed the plot of this book. It was just the incest. Like, that really fucking annoyed me. Not only because in the last book, at least, Jason and Claire were like, this is wrong, this is bad. Like, we shouldn't do this. And they didn't for most of the book. But then, in this book, they're like, fuck it, we don't care. You should. Like, if you are so convinced that he is your blood, you should be way more concerned. And like, I just hated that. I hated it so much. Not even because I knew it was not real, but just because it's like they were convinced it was real and they didn't care. That was a massive fucking red flag. And like 0 out of 10. Hated that. And then, because like Cassie had to go and slip in some actual fucking incest with Sebastian kissing Clary. Why the fuck was that necessary? That was not necessary at all. Like, and I get, you know, you have like he has demon blood, so he's supposed to be bad. And I'm assuming he's coming back in the back half of the trilogy because we don't see a body. But I hated that. I hated that so much. It's like, you're gonna have fake incest. Okay, fine. You can like get your kink off and do that. But then you had to go in to slip in some actual incest. Like, no, like, I did not like that at all. And it really annoyed me, like, genuinely, like, really upset me. And I just, like, if the rest of the book wasn't really good, I would have DNF'd this. And it's rare for me to DNF stuff, but, like, just honestly, the only thing, like, there's nothing that annoys me more than, like, stupid like forbidden romances. I mean, one of my most hated books of all times is Slammed by Colleen Hoover, which is about a relationship between a teacher and his student. I mean, he's like super young and she's like 19, but it's still fucking weird. It's like one of those things that's like, technically it's right, but I feel super uncomfortable the whole time reading it and I fucking hated it. Same with this. Like, technically they're not siblings, but if they think they're siblings and they're making out, that makes me uncomfortable. So anyways, that's my rant about the stupid incest. So let's talk about the rest of the plot. So we have Valentine attacking the city, and I actually really liked them going to the Shadowhunter city. It was really cool. I liked the country of Idris. I thought like that was really cool. It gave me more like kind of high fantasy vibes ish. Than like more urban fantasy vibes, which is like the first 2. So that was kind of like an interesting vibe change that I really liked. I thought the side characters were at their best in this novel. Like, I really liked Simon in this book. I didn't even talk about Simon in my other reviews, but like Simon kind of really annoyed me in the first 2 books. Like, not gonna lie, he was like really annoying. But in this book, I was like, okay, Simon. I thought Isabel wasn't at her best in this book. I want a better character arc for Isabel. She needs more. She deserves better. And then Alec, I think, you know, has steadily just kind of in the background been a good character. And then him and Magnus, of course, have their flirtationship, which is great. And yeah, I really liked that Clary's mom came into this book. She like really introduced a cool new dynamic between her and Clary. And so yeah, there were things that I really enjoyed about this book, which makes it so frustrating to have had to deal with like that stupid incest stuff, because I think that like if you took that plot line out, this book would have been like a 4-star from me. And so I'm just really hoping that we don't have to deal with more of this shit in her other series. And I've been told that we do, which upsets me. But like, I just know that she's a good writer, and you know, sometimes that I can't enjoy her plot and I can't enjoy her world, and so I really want to see more of that be prominent and more at the forefront of her books than this other stuff. So with that, that is the end of my review of City of Glass, and yeah, there you go. So thank you guys so much for watching my big trilogy wrap up, my Trilogy of Trilogies review. This was really fun to make, kind of like speed running through these series. I would have liked to do more in-depth reviews for each of the trilogies, and I think going forward I'm going to start doing that. So I hope I don't make videos like this, because if I make videos like this, it means I'm really, really behind. So, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video and my thoughts on the 3 different trilogies in this video. Let me know what down below in the comments what you've thought of these series. If you've read them, would you recommend them? Also, if you've read the Mortal Instruments Shadowhunter series, is it worth reading more? What series should I be the most excited for? Because everybody's hyped for Chain of Iron right now, and I'm like, there are so many books I have to read before I get to there, and I'm like, you know? But anyways, that's been my review of the Poppy War, the Grisha Trilogy, and the first 3 books in the Mortal Instruments series. So don't forget to subscribe if you want more bookish content from me and more videos like this in the future, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.